Metamedia presents New Horizons, conscious conversations for inner exploration and awakening. Hi, welcome to the 2025 September Equinox Astro Panel. I'm Carmen, your moderator for the discussion today. Our panelists are Cayelin Castell, Robert Wilkinson, Eric Meyers, and Ray Couture. Today we will be discussing, let me share my screen first before I go into what we're going to be talking about. That would be helpful. One moment. Okay, there we go. We're going to be discussing the partial solar eclipse, the total lunar eclipse, alpha and omega points, the Yod, a grand air trine with planets in Mars in Scorpio, Pluto in Aquarius, Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, and the Sun in Libra. There's so much to cover. I'll introduce each panelist before their segment. After all the panelists have spoken, we'll have the discussion between them. And if there's time, we may select a question or two from the live chat for our panelists to answer. Okay. Our first panelist is Cayelin Castell, the co-founder of Venus Alchemy, My Star Alchemy, and the former Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. In addition to writing monthly celestial timings for nearly 3 decades, she enjoys sharing these mysteries through personal readings, her YouTube channel, and online and in-person events. Her approach is based in the visionary understanding that we inform the mysteries as much as they inform us. Welcome, Cayelin. So wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you. And I just want to say, when we're talking about equinox mysteries and everything that's going on, going out and being with the sun as it's rising or setting is a great way to get informed, and also to be informing the mysteries of your intentions and why you're showing up at this time. So just this reminder that the sun at the equinox is rising due east and setting due west. And so it's tracking across the equator of the earth the whole entire time. And that has an effect of lowering the magnetic field. And there's many sites that have been built around the world that represent this, because ancient cultures knew that the magnetic field of the earth was being affected at the equinox. And they did many they built sites, and they were doing ceremonies at this time to be part of being informed by the mysteries and then doing their informing of the mysteries. So, oops.
Are you still seeing the screen?
No.
Really? Okay, hold on 1 second, because I had 2 screens up. 1 second. Let me go back to it. For some reason, it was sharing. I saw 2 screens on the thing. So let me go back. All right. Mercury's not retrograde. All right. There you go.
Okay. Next slide is be good. So, this idea of the lowering of the magnetic field has to do with how the Earth is aligning with the sun and the solar wind that's coming across the earth, and how it's this thing that's called the Russell-McLaren effect. And so around this time, at the March equinox and the September equinox, there are more auroras that happen because of the light that gets through the magnetosphere of the earth, because this is weakened, I guess might be one way to say that, or less. They call them equinox traps in the magnetosphere, in the magnetic field of the earth. And sometimes these can be as big as California or bigger than the entire planet. And this is an image of one that happened in March of 2025 around the equinox. So something just to know for people who live in more northern or southern latitudes, they might see this happening more at this time. It happens actually more at the March equinox, less at the September equinox, but more at the September equinox than any other time besides March. So pretty cool. Let's do the next one. So this is just showing you one of a site that was built in Angkor, Cambodia, it's a temple site where the sun is right on the tip of the temple, the center spire of the temple at the equinox. And then you can also see at the June solstice and the December solstice how it's further off, either further north or further south of that exact east point, and the people gathering here to witness the equinox sun on the top of the spire. So let's go to the next slide. And then this is, actually, this isn't near where I live. It's called Signal Hill in the Tucson Mountains near Tucson, Arizona. The spiral petroglyph. One of the things that's really amazing about this is that they carved the rock to look the same as the background of the mountain. That when you're looking at this petroglyph, you see the mountain in the background. You can see that it looks very similar. And at the equinox, when the sun is rising, the spiral is half lit. So they were tracking equinoxes there as well. So that's pretty cool. And then you see in the other spiral with this dagger on one side of it, this one's from Chaco Canyon. I think our next slide will show a little more of that. So at Chaco Canyon, they created this spiral, and these big rocks were placed in such a way that the equinoxes would light the spiral in a certain way, and the winter solstice and the summer solstice would light the spiral in a certain way. They also built the thing so that when the sun came up exactly due east, it would light up these windows within the complex as well. So they were very much tracking how this was happening, so that they would know when to do their ceremonies and when to be in communion with the sun at the equinox time. So let's go to the next one. And then another thing that's really fascinating about the equinox time is that the sun at the exact equinox is aligned with the North Galactic Pole. So at the March equinox, it's the South Galactic Pole. At the September equinox, it's the North Galactic Pole. And the North Galactic Pole is found around Como Berenices, the constellation that there's lots of stories that are connected to that constellation that are pretty fun to tune into. But this is also considered a place where you can see more galaxies beyond our galaxy, and you can connect with other intergalactic connections. And so it is a time when we can really receive a greater understanding of our relationship to time and space if we're tuning in at this time as well. And just something to know is that the equinox sun aligned with the North Galactic Pole at the September equinox can only happen every 26,000 years. For a time period. It moves 1 degree every 72 years, so it's for quite a long time period. But that's what's happening now. So it's something for us to also tune into when we're looking at the equinox. So next slide. Okay, so now I want to. I'm just giving a sky map because this equinox is so spectacular in the fact that there is a partial solar eclipse that closes the eclipse window that opened on September 7th. Yeah, we're like right in the window over right now as we're doing this recording, and then closes the day before the exact equinox. And it's the second new moon in Virgo. The first one was in August, and this is the second new moon in Virgo at 29 degrees Virgo. And something also to notice is that Mars is 29 degrees Libra at the time of the eclipse. And then as the sun moves into Libra, Mars moves into Scorpio. So we have the sun at 29 Virgo, Mars at 29 Libra. We have the sun then at 0 Libra, and then Mars at 0 Scorpio. And if we think of the 29th degree of any sign is like a culmination point, but this new moon at 29 Virgo is like a culmination or completion of Virgo, or an omega point, a completion point. And then the equinox is an alpha point, a beginning point. And we could think of it as the pure, undiluted essence of Libra and the beginning of a new season and a new journey, or again, an alpha point. So we have alpha and omega points really being featured as we are entering this equinox time. So let's go to the next slide. And then this is just giving you a vision. It's a partial eclipse, but it's fairly, it's pretty much covering most of the sun. Well, it's pretty cool in that regard. Not visible in the United States where I happen to be, and where the rest of us, I think, happen to be, but it's, something that we can imagine is amplifying and accelerating the energies that are present with this new moon. So whenever we have intentions, especially because it's at a 29-degree point, it's intensifying the opportunity to complete what has been and begin something new, preparing to move into new territories as we move into the equinox the next day with the sun at the 0 point. So if we think of honoring the sacred essence of life being Virgo and embracing a new way of relating to each other and the earth being Libra, we have these two things happening in such a big way at this equinox time. So let's go to the next slide. And so this is just showing the equinox partial solar eclipse chart and how it's opposite Saturn and Neptune. The sun and moon are opposite Saturn and Neptune. And so that energy is being also added into this equinox, into this new moon eclipse energy. And because we've had Saturn and Neptune crossing the 0 Aries point, started with Neptune in March and then Saturn in May. And then Saturn went back across that point in just recently, and then Neptune's coming back across that point. I think it's October 22nd, and then they'll cross again in the early part of next year. So there's this back and forth between an alpha and omega point. So, we're really needing to pay attention to the fact that this is endings and beginnings. And then we have this grand trine to the Sun and Uranus and Pluto, and if we think of a grand trine as like an easy energy, an easy flow of energy, it's bringing people together in new mutually supportive ways. Now, Pluto trine the Sun will also put a spotlight on the shadow aspects, and that's clearing the way so we can embrace evolutionary change and leading edge perspectives that revolutionize our perception of the world. So that's just, and this is just one of the things that's happening. I know the rest of everyone's going to probably cover some of the other things, but I just wanted to highlight that one piece. So let's go to the next slide. And this is just a look at how the equinox is relating to the USA chart. So, and if we think about and I know there's different USA charts. So this one just happens to have the midheaven at 2 degrees Libra. When the sun enters Libra, it's going to be right there. And this grand trine seems to be very much activating what's going on the US chart. The other thing that's interesting is Chiron is square Mercury this year. We had the Chiron return to the US chart last year, and now this year it's squaring the US Mercury, and Jupiter's getting ready to cross that point. So it's illuminating so many things, like what is it that we're needing to heal in terms of how we are perceiving ourselves in relationship to the rest of the world, or the U.S. is perceiving itself in relationship to the rest of the world. So we could also imagine this is about how we are co-creating our reality through our thoughts, words, and actions. And that Chiron and also Eris, who has been hanging out with Chiron, have 2 conjunctions already this year. They're going to have a 3rd one in December. And that this is enhancing ways to heal the wounds of chaos. That, of course, is something that's happening in a big way in the U.S. right now. And then the Saturn-Neptune opposition to the Sun is activating the midheaven IC, that axis, within a few degrees, depending on what chart you use. But we could imagine that this is illuminating how dreaming new dreams and finding new forms for those dreams to manifest are in the forefront by taking decisive action. And then Pallas Athena is getting ready to conjunct the south node of the U.S. chart. It's retrograde, and it will station direct, I think it's on October 4th, within minutes of being exact with the south node. So we could imagine that this is the time to utilize the wisdom that Pallas Athena brings forth, crafting a new creative path forward. So completing with things of the past so we can move forward to a better future. And that's the way I'd like to look at it. So if I'm helping to inform the mysteries, that's what what I choose to inform them as. And I think that means I am complete.
Thank you, Cayelin. Okay. Our next astropanelist is Robert Wilkinson, an astrologer with over 54 years' experience as a counselor, public speaker, author, strategic analyst, and he's also the president of Astrology Arizona. Robert publishes Aquarius Papers, the first daily astrological interactive website in the world visited by people from over 130 countries. His newest book is The Cycles of Life, 7-Year Cycles and Stages of Change. It's his original creation of a method to see the rulers of each year of life and how our lives break into important 7-year periods. He also authored The Magic of Venus, Friendship, Soulmates, and Twin Flames, Saturn, Spiritual Master, Spiritual Friend, and a new look at Mercury retrograde. Okay, welcome, Robert.
Well, hello. First, I'll just start by reminding everybody that the charts for the solstices and the equinoxes are guideposts, supposedly showing us the symbolic weather for the next 90 days. And I take a Western tropical astrological analytical approach. Because of Saturn retrograde in Pisces, North Node in Pisces in play through early 2026, the autumn equinox of 2025 begins a season of review, reflection, remembrance, and closure on many things in our past. As it was said, we have a very beneficial grand air trine between the Sun, Uranus, and Pluto, showing a stable understanding. But there's a need for clarity about the roles that we want to play and what roles we're not playing. This season will favor making connections because of the air trine, but there are adjustments and expansion through sacrifice indicated by the Yod, the finger of God, which is an evolutionary configuration that works off of Uranus sextile Neptune with both of them quincunx to Mars, making Mars the pointer. So wherever we have one Scorpio is where we will have to focus. It'll be a productive focus, but it will involve a certain amount of adjustment and expansion through sacrifice. Interestingly, in the June solstice, we had 2 yods. So this kind of continues the theme of productive adjustments, sacrifices, setting aside preconceptions, while eliminating any obstructions internally or externally to what's coming in early 2026. So this is a season of saying goodbye, of adjusting, of sacrificing, and of letting a lot of things just kind of flow down the time stream. And some of us are going to get completely new re-beginnings. For others, it's time to cut their losses and turn in new directions after saying goodbye to whatever has run its course. Autumn is heavily influenced by the September solar and lunar eclipses. And as you probably know, if you've read my material, I believe eclipses to be cosmic recyclers. They only take away what we no longer need, what no longer has potential or repotential. So they kind of come along and they help us recycle the stuff we need. They remove stuff so that we can attract more appropriate activities, ideas, people, and so forth. And these fall with the Sun in Virgo, so obviously it's going to heavily impact our Virgo sectors where we see the light. And they do bookend. One is at the 16th degree of Virgo. The other is the 30th degree of Virgo. So in other words, these are in play for a while wherever we have Virgo. The lunar total eclipse was a 5.5-month influence. This solar eclipse will go on for a lot more years. Now, the thing is, these are favorable eclipses, which will help us let go of old things. And the solar eclipse, particularly on the 30th degree of Virgo, the theme is about escape from an old destiny. So by whatever is shut down over the next few years, it will liberate us to accept, or I should say, to craft a new destiny of some sort. Basically, it's a season of letting go and letting things flow. And you can find out more at my site about the eclipses, and I'll be posting on the solar eclipses soon. At the autumn equinox, the sun enters Libra. One Libra is a degree of archetypes. It brings visions of archetypes and so-called perfect forms. And this involves embracing ideals, harvesting the fruits of our labor of the past 6 months, and adjusting the balance of things. And the planets, as you can see, are widely spread out across 8 different signs, with the main autumn activity in the Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn sectors due to Mars transiting those signs. So that's the focus for us over the next 13 weeks, is wherever we have Scorpio, Sagittarius, and early Capricorn. So we'll take a look at a couple of key factors here. If you'll note, the moon is at 11 Libra in a new moon phase. And this indicates the next 90 days will feature a lot of instinctive activity with Libra prominent. The new moon phase is said to be impulsive and subjective, projecting its ideals out into the world. With both the sun and moon in the first half of Libra, the focus is on transfiguration, with the moon on a degree of teaching and being taught, assisting and being assisted, with those who are more evolved helping those who are less evolved to grow. And the 8 signs are occupied, but they have, if you'll note, asymmetrical gaps in between. So this chart becomes a splay Jones pattern. And Dr. Jones has stated that this suggests highly individual or purposeful emphases. So this will be an individualizing season. And it's got a quality of rugged resistance to pigeonholing and a persistent emphasis on individuality. The pattern's pretty intense. It can't be limited to any single point of activity. So don't be surprised if some things are all spread out and some things don't mesh well with others. So I would call this a somewhat disjointed season within the larger stability indicated by the Grand Air Trine. And the Grand Air Trine with an opposition actually forms what I call a peace sign configuration. It's stabilizing, it's aware, and it's highly productive. Now, the splay pattern will be generally in force through early December, so there's going to be a lot of widely diverse activities that require that we focus our energies through Jupiter to express themes of accepting a mantle of power or leadership in some area represented by late Cancer in our charts. And this is going to particularly come into focus late October through November and early December because of the grand water trines that are formed. So we start with a grand air trine, but for a good deal of the autumn, we get a grand water trine, which will facilitate flow wherever we have late water, as well as late earth in our charts. Now, this season begins the long-term trine between Jupiter and Saturn, so you can expect a lot of stability and understanding wherever this trine falls in your chart, and is particularly triggered by Mercury and Mars and the Sun, Venus, as the autumn goes on. So I think that the trine between Jupiter and Saturn will help us find the discipline and structure we need to flow forward as we navigate endings. As I said, this will be strengthened by all the transits through late Scorpio. We have a Mercury retrograde that's going to make 3 different grand water trines during its transit during that period. And so they're going to be exceptionally strengthening to any planets we have in the last 10 degrees of the Earth and water signs. So let's see how the planets shift by location. Los Angeles, you'll see, has 27 Scorpio on the ascendant. There's a really heavy emphasis with 7 planets above the horizon. So it's a very prominent, very public season. There's a balance between the number of planets east and west. And you'll note that the yod points to the 12th house, which is both protection as well as completion and harvests. Now, going to Washington, D.C., we have 30 degrees of Sagittarius rising. And here, most of the planets are still above the horizon and on the west side, which shows a heavier emphasis in terms of interacting and relationships and what we're doing with others. Now, you'll note that the yod points to the 10th, and with the lunation in the 9th, a lot of focus on foreign and legal activities, which shouldn't be a surprise. And we'll come back to this chart in a minute. So anyway, the United States has between late Scorpio and early Capricorn rising. Seattle has 18 Scorpio. Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, and Billings have 29 Scorpio. Yuma, Arizona to Sheridan, Wyoming is 1 Sagittarius, and Phoenix has 2 Sag. All the way east, we find New York City has 1 Capricorn on the ascendant, Portland, Maine has 2 Capricorn, and Miami has 5 Capricorn. So west of the line, between Yuma and eastern Wyoming, has late Scorpio rising, which puts Mars as its ruler. East of there, to the extreme east coast, has Sag rising with Jupiter rising. So it's really, there's going to be a heavy Scorpio emphasis in the western United States, a heavy Sagittarian emphasis through most of the United States, and an early Capricorn influence in the east coast of the United States. Moving on to London, we see it has 16 Aries rising. 6 planets west, that's the emphasis, so others, the relationship stuff, and 6 below the horizon, so there's a lot of non-public activity going on. You'll note the yod points to the 7th house, so that is adjustments in alliances. Now moving on to Kiev, we have 8 Gemini, and the Sabian symbol of 8 Gemini is the closed down factory. It's a degree of repolarization and protest. So you can expect Kiev to be a little more militant even than in the last season. You'll see that we have 6 below, 6 west, the same as the UK. Saturn in the 11th, especially up there with the North Node, brings good alliances, especially trined by Jupiter in the 3rd house. Moscow moves the ascendant forward to 24 degrees of Gemini rising. The Sabian symbol is making progress despite difficulty. Now, both Kiev and Moscow have similar placements, though Moscow has North Node in the 10th, while Kiev has it on the border of the 10th and 11th. The South Node in Moscow's 4th is bad for harvests and health. So it looks like that this is almost a mutually destructive situation in the next 13 weeks, because with that South Node down there in the 4th, it looks like they're both going to be jockeying for public position while having destruction in the house of the home. So anyway, let's get back to Washington, D.C. The ascendant is 30 Sag. I see the final degree of Sagittarius as completing the adventurism. And because the Sabian symbol is the spiritual ruler blessing the faithful, it's about giving or receiving a blessing. And the ascendant ruler in the 7th favors those who oppose DC. And it's on a degree of expectancies of things to come. Pluto on the cusp of the 1st and 2nd is on the thunderstorm symbol, promising unexpected events which will galvanize the masses to action. You'll note that all the transpersonal spiritual planets are below the horizon, showing a lot of hidden spiritual transformation on the collective level. There's a lot of spiritual energy that's cooking below the surface. The Libra stellium in the 9th is ruled by Venus on a degree of getting over preconceptions, with the moon ruling the ascendant ruler on a degree of finding new ways to teach and communicate. Mercury and Venus are in each other's signs, therefore they are in mutual reception. And that's a very powerful self-reinforcing closed energy loop that shows re-beginnings as we get over those preconceptions. So basically, we have to set a lot of our preconceptions on the shelf because that will lead to the re-beginnings. Saturn in the 3rd is on a degree of things falling apart. Now, that's ruled by Jupiter in the long-term trine. Jupiter's in its sign of exaltation, so Jupiter will be the more powerful planet in this autumn. Just wherever it is, you're going to do well with that Jupiter because it's very, very favorable. And especially, again, for late Earth and water planets, it requires adaptation to social values as we open to a deeper practical connection. Mars is also clearly dominant in this chart because it's in its home sign, it's in the 10th house, it's elevated, it's the pointer to the yod created by the Uranus sextile Neptune. Now, the interesting thing is Uranus at 2 Gemini is on the Santa Claus is coming to town degree. And Neptune's on the 1st degree of Aries, showing whatever is sacrificed or adjusted the next 13 weeks will open us to deeper relationships and help us focus our intensity. Again, whatever it is we have to leave behind, whatever it is we have to sacrifice, will clear out the clutter so that we can move forward into the new Saturn and Neptune in Aries era coming in early 2026. As noted, the ruler of the Sun, Moon, and Mercury is Venus at 4 Virgo. It brings a diligent working quality to the season. And that mutual reception rules all the other planets except for Mars and Neptune. It makes Venus and Mercury very powerful in the season. So we have Venus, Mercury, and Mars. So all the metaphysical stuff's cooking below the surface, and we have a primary focus on Mercury, Venus, and Mars, wherever those fall in our charts. Again, overall, I think the aspects show a really good mix of harmonious energies via the peace sign evolutionary configuration made by the grand air trine with Neptune. Be clear about the roles you want to play and don't want to play, and the broader processes of social change, and how sacrifices will lead to transfiguring experiences. The Mars square Pluto is the joker. It's the volatility. And the Plutonic harmony, though, of understanding provided by the grand air trine can be released productively through the Mars square by accepting new levels of social interaction. So get around blockages, and when you encounter corrosive or dishonest people, put the brakes on pleasantly, creatively, and genuinely. That square is good for mobilizing your heart and enjoyment of life. So I see the autumn as a heavily transformational period with great possibilities to meet people who you're compatible with. New identities, new power are just around the corner, but there are old matters to close out between now and November. And with Saturn going stationary direct at 26 Pisces in November, this is about we get to do our own thing in our own way. Others get to do their own thing in their own way, and nobody should try to coerce anybody else to do anything other than their own way. Backstory. June, July, August, we saw the future of 2026. Now we get to clear out old ghosts, old memories, old inertias, and old ambivalencies. Again, this is going to be almost like a back to the future because Saturn's back in Pisces, Neptune's going to go back in Pisces, Uranus is going to go back into Taurus, which is where they were early this year before everything changed. March, April, May, June, July, August. And now we get to go back and revisit stuff one last time. So the next 90 days bring stable understanding and a need to be bold rather than timid, subtle, and not narrow in our view. See the relationship of the parts to the whole while remembering that as we let go of the lesser, we make space for the greater. The Yod and Mars square are the biggest grinds and affecting the early degrees of the fixed signs. So anyone with planets in the early fixed signs, show a little caution as you demonstrate right action. New vision, new relationships, new archetypes, and saying goodbye to the old are all in front of us in the next few weeks. So this is about mobilizing and finding new beginnings as we leave the past behind us. Use spiritual force with precision and detachment, remembering that we're still finding objectivity through humor. Let go of old rules, duties, and obligations. Trust and deepen your relationship with self, others, and source. That Pisces will be good for connecting us to all that is, because we're all in this together. And each of us who's walked our walk now has wisdom at our disposal, which constitutes the mandate for our future. Things are definitely on the move. And with the retrogrades, it's truly back to the future.
Thank you, Robert. That's a lot to digest. People may need to rewind it later. Okay, our next astro panelist is Eric Meyers, a counseling astrologer, author, and teacher. He has developed his astrological methodology, excuse me, for the past 25 years using a progressive Aquarian approach. It integrates modern science, psychology, and universal spiritual principles. Eric has authored 7 astrology books, among them Uranus, The Constant of Change, Elements and Evolution, The Astrology of Awakening, and The Spiritual Dimensions of the Beatles. And I think you're writing another one now, aren't you, Eric?
Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Yes, well, thank you for that. And I'm going to pick up on a lot of points that Robert just made because he was so just on point with so many things. I'm going to bring in my own kind of evolutionary trajectory that I want to speak about. So this chart is the one that is cast for Washington, D.C., because you have to cast a chart for somewhere. But as I've done in the past, I'm not going to focus that much on houses, which are set up based on place. I want to talk more universally. What is the evolutionary trajectory, the curriculum that we are all enrolled in, regardless of where we are on the planet, but more broadly, what is going on here as far as spiritual growth. So we could look at the South Node, generally speaking, as something that is maturing, resolving, something that is in a process of development, a work in progress. So there are, generally speaking, things connected to the South Node and its ruler that need to be addressed, matured, what have you. And this is where I want to open up this talk. Mercury in Libra, ruler of the South Node, also conjunct the moon, and the moon also brings us back to the past, earlier stages of development, what I call the spiritual childhood, things that the personality needs, generally speaking, to feel okay. So what we have here is the dynamic of Libran diplomacy, harmony, the collective social contract that we all see every single day. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? Beautiful day out there. We all have enrolled in a very socialized, civilized way of being that is non-offensive, that is simply upholding a broader cultural contract of how we're supposed to all get along. And it, for the most part, works. And there's nothing wrong with it, necessarily. The issue is, when does that Libran, diplomatic, culturally conditioned way of being undercut things that are more about difficulty, about more turbulence, about things that are not so sweet and have a nice day? And that's what we see with this chart. The North Node is loosely, although still relevant, conjunct Saturn and Pisces. And even though the ruler of the North Node, Neptune, is conjunct Saturn and Pisces. And this is about spiritual maturation. This is about eating our vegetables, as I like to say, rather than having the yummy chocolate cake all the time, which is what the personality wants. So how are we going to spiritually mature away from having things be simply more accommodating or friendly to our personality desires? And this is an ongoing lesson for years and years and years, with the focus of Neptune in Aries about spiritual responsibility of the individual. Saturn also about maturation, that has this long conjunction with Neptune, which is mainly about 1.5 to 2 years, given, different orbs. And so we are growing, maturing into our spiritual adulthood. gradually over many years. So the issue that I see with this chart, what this autumn might be about, I think of Mars in Scorpio is the central planet here going on for us to wrestle with. We've got Mars in Scorpio, square Pluto, and Aquarius. And there's a lot of aspects, of course, as others have mentioned. There's so many interconnections with all of these planets, more or less at the early degrees of the zodiac sign, making a plethora of various aspects. So we could get all enamored by the air grand trine. We could even get quite enamored by Neptune exactly opposed the sun, which is awfully beautiful and has a lot of potential. But the narrative that I'm weaving is that Pluto square Mars, especially in a shadow-oriented Scorpio, Mars is, and Pluto in and of itself goes with that archetype. There's a lot of necessarily shadow work that needs to come up that is about bringing things out of the underworld so we can examine it, we can learn it, we can expose things and bring it to the light. Now, one obvious thing, if we're going to look at politics and all of this, focus that we see on the Epstein files of political scandals, of things that are more intimate or sexual or hidden or secretive, is obviously part of the Scorpio Pluto archetype. Mars conflict, Mars things that are going to be edgy, things that might be shadowy, obviously around sexual behavior. This could be part of it, but also the conflict around exposing things. But I don't want to get too carried into that one example of a political nature. That's relevant. We will see developments along those lines. But let's bring it to you and me. What do we need to do to be more connected with our inner truth? To be able to be more courageous as the spiritual warrior? Less in that diplomatic, socialized, friendly, inoffensive Libran way. We need to address things that are part of our underworld in order to integrate so we can move forward into the possibilities of the spiritual, maturation, the possibilities of intellectual revolution, Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius, the possibility of the proverbial age in Aquarius. All of this only becomes more relevant and more available when we are more psychologically mature and accountable to the personality level. The so-called spiritual bypass is always in vogue. And that is, let's go to all of the wonderful possibilities and evade the shadow and evade the psychological and evade accountability around the past. These are things that are less appetizing in general. These are things that are absolutely necessary if we're going to be ready and more healed and more wise about moving in this age of Aquarius kind of direction. So as Robert pointed out, yes, Saturn just moved back to Pisces. Neptune's about to move back to Pisces. Uranus is about to go back to Taurus, and not so far from now. Pluto will stay in Aquarius, but it's hanging out at the first degree at the station point. And even Chiron is still at the end of Aries before it moves to Taurus next year. So when we have all these sign changes, there is a momentum. So as Robert was saying, Cayelin, too, we have to integrate, we have to coalesce, we have to be more wise about our wounds, our shadow, our anger, our frustrations. This is all Pluto, Mars. For instance, one thing might be, if you still have leftover anger about a relationship, which doesn't have to be romantic, it could be any type of connection. What do you do with that energy? How is it going to be transmuted into something constructive, into expressions of courage, into conviction, into things that are empowered as the so-called warrior, rather than tiptoeing around in Libra, socialized, inoffensive. I don't want to hurt anyone, and I want to be, nice kind of tendencies that most of us have just by virtue of being part of the culture and modern society. So there is a lot of work around psychological realism here. And now another facet of Pisces, North Node, Saturn in Pisces, is ultimately around forgiveness, ultimately around compassion for yourself, for others. We're all works in progress. We're all involved in, a spiritual curriculum. So when we get real about the intensity, Pluto, Mars, whatever is edgy, volatile, much more, just there's no combination in astrology that's more edgy than Pluto, Mars. We got to be with all that stuff. And with the successful elimination, good Pluto word, just like using the bathroom, when we get it out of the system, then the arrival at more compassion, more perspective, more gratitude for these experiences, because they enable us to mature spiritually by being our curriculum. And that ultimately could be the promise of the autumn season, is arriving at gratitude and compassion and arriving at more healed resolution. Because the book I am writing now, as for the introduction comment, it's called Seasons of the Moon. And I am looking at the 4 seasons and how they have a evolutionary rhythm. And autumn is the season of completion, of resolution. And then winter is the new beginning of life with the new year. And the acorn that fell off the prior tree in autumn becomes its own new tree, potentially beginning with the winter, expanding with the spring, reaching fruition with the summer, and then autumn again, the season of realism, endings, integration, closure. What did we learn? How can we be wiser from learning in order to begin anew, which is winter? So in many ways, autumn is the least egoically friendly of the 4 seasons. It's when we have to release attachments, when we need to wise up, when we don't get everything our way, we have to let things go, we have to accept what has already happened. And this is the new moon in Libra, a new relationship with the beauty of autumn, with the beauty of letting things go and trusting life, and through that deeper wisdom that I'm mentioning is part of the way to get there. So, sure, I think there's going to be volatility with this Mars and Scorpio square Pluto. There's going to be big news headlines and stuff of that nature. But ultimately, I think, we get caught up in things outside of us. And again, I want to reorient the listener. What do I need to do to be in my spiritual adulthood? What do I need to be accountable about? How can I be more psychologically astute about my own emotions and my own attachment structure? And where do I tend to sugarcoat things in order to have more ease? I think these are some of the big questions for us to address. One more point I do want to mention, Uranus in Gemini. I've been waiting for decades for Uranus to get to Gemini and have this trine with Pluto. It is part of this chart. There is a grand trine with the sun. There are things that could be exciting and novel conceptually, intellectually. Yes, and that's available. But however, yet again, we do have these retrogrades. There is this sense of, in my view, dismantling the old operating system. We have some awareness of what the new stuff might be, but we still need to dismantle the old operating system in the autumn and with these retrogrades. With Uranus going back to Taurus, one final little dip in that pool, so to speak. And where do we need to further unplug from Earth, Taurus, from what was concretized before, in order to then next year, when Uranus settles into Gemini, open to unlimited possibilities of new ideas and things that are a lot more progressive and exciting and futuristic. So where are we still attached to the past and letting go of the past autumn kind of seasonal consciousness? So there's a lot more I can say, but that is my sense of the spiritual trajectory that is being represented here, and I'll say more for an interactive conversation with the others.
Thank you so much, Eric. So much going on. All right. Our final astro panelist is Ray Couture, an astrological counselor and life coach for over 50 years who's presented numerous workshops and lectures. He created a film company, Metamedia, which produced the only existing record of a lecture by Dane Rudjar, his teacher mentor. Ray also produces a monthly astrology report, Astrological Perspectives, and this New Horizons podcast, which is available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm happy to congratulate Ray as the author of his new book, New Horizons in Astrology, which will be available in 2026. Congratulations, Ray.
Well, thank you very much. And thank all of you. The detail and personalization and understanding that people need in this particular phase of the year, as also a phase in the life of the planet, as well as the various social organizations we call countries. But, for me, looking at the geocentric chart, first of all, here the overall emphasis seems to be at this equinox moment on the need to summon the courage that can only come from intuitively knowing that humanity is in the process of awakening from its illusions. It certainly doesn't look that way. But on the other hand, the illusions are becoming vivid, clear, obvious. The reality of the past is rapidly disintegrating because something new is birthing or needs to, is trying to, is marrying, espousing a new vision for the future kind of world that would be based upon a deeper, more spiritual level of understanding. It's what this geocentric chart is about. But to do this, to this end, I believe that the two most important aspects in this chart are the two yards called fingers of fate, the old school of fingers of God. The first one in the fifth house is focused on the collective need for growth and transformation. The sextile between Saturn and Neptune shows that this transformation involves, like it or not, political intrigue, because politicians are humans and they're using this astrological energy to satisfy their own egoic needs. But there will be disintegration of socio-cultural structures that are beginning to happen. And that first one, as I said, in the fifth house, of course, is pointing directly at Uranus in Gemini. All of the wonderful surprises and beautiful things that change can bring. If it doesn't change your mind, it hasn't changed anything. The second yard that I want to talk about is focused on the Scorpio Mars, and it really implores or is begging, is deeply requiring us to revive our sense of our own authenticity and power here as a people, as humanity, in the midst of the emergence of social political failures. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction, sextile to Uranus, asks for creating a healthier, more spiritual approach to life, with Mars, the activator of the impulse to heal and renew. So if we could please to switch to the heliocentric chart. Now, I think that the heliocentric chart shows the deeper spirit's intention, God's will, if you want to put it that way, if you need to personalize it. Most of our difficulties are rooted in our failure to understand this intention, especially when confronted with all of the egoic concerns of daily life, which are pouring down on us from one dimension or another, whether it's your phone or your email or the newspaper or the television. It's all just cackle, a whole bunch of that going on. So in the chart we see via the trine between Pluto, Uranus, and the intense focus that Pluto is attempting to totally change our values. That's the underlying underworld part of it all. There's a deep need that somewhat surpasses our daily consciousness, but is requiring a change in values and our sense of what is and what isn't real. All of this is in response to the need that is depicted by the opposition between Pluto and Uranus and Venus for, over there at Couture, is some kind of wholesale elimination of what is obsolete. This is what we've been talking about it for the whole period of time, I believe, in a sense. So this is what the Spirit is offering as a better way forward. And of course, we can choose. Then we look at left side and right side in the heliocentric chart. The left side refers to creating destiny, the capacity to do so, the energies involved. And the right side is concerned with fulfilling that destiny. And destiny here requires that we take some kind of action in changing our thinking so that we can become more engaged with this higher level of consciousness. This fulfillment, this is the fulfillment of spiritual destiny, and it requires an authentic Leo, 8th house cusp, authentic Leonic response, creative, authentic response to the crisis, which is a lack of consciousness, through allowing the spiritual needs to take precedence in our lives so that the mind can adapt to a deeper and more spiritual self-realization. That's a general idea I wanted to get across, but when you look at them in a biwheel, you can see the differences more vividly, I think. The middle one is geocentric, and the outer circle is heliocentric. And I'm not a heliocentric astrologer as much as I'm trying to use heliocentric to completely fill the life with the spiritual purpose as it seems to intend on its own. And the egoic idea comes from the existence of the moon in the geocentric chart, because that gives us this perspective of a slant, a little different picture. And so planets from our perspective can go retrograde, but from spiritual perspective, they never do. So the Saturn that we've been talking about to some degree in the geocentric chart is retrograde. In the heliocentric, it's not. It's the 29th degree of Pisces, nearly the 30th. But the interesting thing in the heliocentric third house is the existence of the part of fortune between Saturn and Neptune, which indicates some sort of really, if it's not the part of fortune is the earth, but that's the same thing. It's not the Arabic point, but the point of fortune is that's our fortune. Here we are, caught between the past and the need to believe that we can do something new and something different. Chiron has moved very little, Uranus very little, but Venus has dropped from where it is in Virgo all the way back into, can't see the colors there, all the way back into Cancer. But looking at the geocentric chart, the distance between the sun and the moon involves already having passed over Mercury. So there's got to be an internal understanding here that needs to evolve, to emerge, to somehow or other the moon will eventually very quickly hit Mars. So what has to emerge is an action that is scorpionic in the sense that is healing. And Scorpio rules the 8th house as well, and the cusp of that 8th house is Leo. So our validity as a species on this planet is at stake here. It is not merely political or merely spiritual, but it's survival. So with that, I will stop talking for a while. I'm done.
You don't want to do a comparison, Ray?
Well, I thought I was running out of time.
Well, we can push it for 2 minutes if you have 2 minutes to share a comparison between the two charts.
Okay, well, in both of them, the first planet to rise is Pluto, and the last one is Mars. Put the two of those things together as the two levels of energy that is required for us to heal, to revive, to understand, to deal with the results of life. Pluto is intense on eliminating everything that is obsolete, changing everything about what we value, because in the geo chart, it's retrograding back into the first house. It's a personal responsibility. Eric brought it up many times. But the Pluto in the heliocentric chart is not retrograde, and it is very close to and will be over 20 years moving through this whole area of this chart by progression. So we're looking for many, many kinds of changes, most of which are going to be in the realm of what we believe, what we think, and what we need to change, and learning all about that. Those two means that the spirit intent here is for revamping things. The geocentric problem is the egoic thing is trying to be nice and say, oh, we need a lot of change. Oh, how should we do it? No. Everything is leaving. Everything is failing because it isn't real to begin with. One last thing. Maya. Illusion. Really? Yeah. What is the illusion? That there is an out there. Everything that is within what you are. As Robert has said 1,000 times, we are eternal beings with a body and a mind. It is these eternal beings. I'm enamored of the Shambhala warrior prophecy. If these eternal beings come to an awakening, and 50 million, 1 billion, 2 billion people, we've got it. It's done. We win. It's over. We get to suffer and learn and plant seeds and build another future.
Thank you, Ray. That's there's so much promise, I think, I mean, there's challenges, but there's so much promise in the charts now. I do have a couple of items that I want you, the panelists, to speak to, not directed at anyone specifically. And one of them is the relevance of Pluto being out of bounds, which starts September 11th into October, and then it repeats that pattern for several years for the in the autumn in the Northern Hemisphere. Would anyone like to talk about that?
All right, I'll say a couple thoughts on it. Well, I mean, Pluto is so irregular is the first thing about it. I mean, with its incline and the amount of years it spends per sign, which varies greatly. You know, it goes through Taurus very slow, close to 28 years, and it flies through Scorpio in less than 13 years. And Pluto is the only planet that goes out of bounds in signs that are, all the other planets go out of bounds either in Gemini, Cancer, or Sagittarius and Capricorn. But Pluto, the rule breaker, as I just mentioned, can go out of bounds in Leo or Aquarius, which is what we're seeing now, is out of bounds in Aquarius. It's the only planet that could possibly go out of bounds in Aquarius. So it's complicated and it's unique to Pluto. And, you know, the general kind of, you know, understanding that many people have about out of bounds, which is beyond the more conventional or usual type of functioning, and into things that are more extraordinary, not necessarily positive or negative, but different, unique, unusual, rule-breaking, things that are not necessarily the norm. So who knows what might unfold? I don't do predictions with it. But my sense is that there is something going on collectively. That's Pluto. It does have relevance for our collective consciousness. All the outer planets do. There is something that perhaps a growth spurt kind of passage where things might be more extreme, more extraordinary, more volatile, perhaps. And if you located in Leo Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius, this whole tension between the Aquarian, we're all in this together, and the polarity of that is I need to look after my own self-interest and my own personality and my own kind of way of being. This is the Titanic kind of antagonism or opposition or work that we need to balance. That we is just as important as me. And things of that variety, issues around our attachments to the spiritual child, to the ego, versus the Aquarian. We're all in this together. And if I support you, I benefit. And we need to look out for our collective health as one unified organism on this planet. So these types of issues coming up and playing out in however they do, collectively and also personally, I think is part of the out of bounds nature to highlight this tension.
Thank you, Eric. The other question that I had was about the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all being in retrograde. Does anyone want to speak to that?
I'll take a crack at that. All retrogrades are a review. We've already been down that path once. Now we get a different angle on it. So you could call it space, call it time, call it speed, whatever you want. We get a chance to review it and rethink it. And it's interesting to me, again, that the review is ultimately going to lead us back into earth and water of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in the tropical system. So we get to review a lot of our relationship to all that is, to the collective unconscious, to the collective consciousness, to value, to resource, to meaning, to whatever it is that's been revolutionized in our entire sector the past 7 years. We're getting a brand new last look at it, preparing for it to go direct in January on the rejuvenation degree. So I think that what we're going to see is a review of responsibilities, limitations, and fears. And then we get to move forward with Saturn when it goes direct in November. From one perspective, you could say that we're at the end of our Pluto review because it's about to go direct. We're in the middle of our Neptune review because it won't go direct until January. We've just begun our Uranian review because it won't go direct until the spring. Saturn's really the focus here, though, because it's now in the deep waters and we're getting one last look back at having to forgive and let things flow down the timeline, because that's the going direct at the Sabian symbol of 26 degrees of Pisces, where we get to see the poetry of our life. We get to see the life in our poetry, so to speak. But there was one thing I wanted to talk about that Ray's heliocentric and geocentric talk inspired here. First of all, Saturn's at 29 Pisces in both charts. Things are going to fall apart, period. That is the spectrum. We have to see the relationship of the parts to the whole. And one of the other things, two other things. One, in the geocentric chart, the splay pattern is focused on the air trine in the Jupiter trine Saturn. But in the heliocentric chart, the splay is focused on the water element. That's the trinal energies. So geocentric is about air, heliocentric is about water. And there, the trine, the exact trine to Saturn, I mean, Jupiter was in a wide trine, but Venus was in a really tight trine. And in fact, it's interesting in this chart because Mars kind of pulls both of them together. Okay. And the only other thing I want to say about that heliocentric chart is if we think of that as the chart of spirit or logos, how logos looks at us. The heliocentric Jupiter Sabian symbol is 11 degrees of Cancer, which is the clown caricaturing personalities. I can't help but understand that in the media, there's a lot more caricaturing going on right now than there ever was before. South Park and Newsom, they're all caricaturing. And so to me, if the heliocentric is what Logos is about, with Jupiter, Logos wants us to have a sense of humor this season. It really wants us to have this sort of, let's puncture some of the pomposity and let's loosen up and look at the irony and look at the satire going on behind all of the self-importance of human affairs.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your wisdom on that. So let's open it up for a little discussion. Let's keep it short if we can, and some closing comments. So, Cayelin, do you want to start? We'll go in order, and I can change slides if you want to refer to a slide.
This is about us taking responsibility for our experience and how we're going forward. So if having the awareness of what's going on and then making choices based on that awareness and being willing to look at our shadow, feel our feelings, process, release, transmute, transform, that's the opportunity that we have. And ideally we come from it from a place of love, where we love ourselves, we love the world, we love each other. And that really, I think, has the power to change everything. So that's what I want to say and wrapping it up.
Robert already gave his words. Do you want to say anything in final comments, Robert?
Because of the Pisces, remember that you're feeling everything. All of us have Pisces somewhere. To feel all the complex feelings of humanity doesn't mean anything's wrong. It means that there's something right with you because you're feeling. That's empathy. That is the nature of our bond of connectedness. So if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel sad, if you feel uncertain, don't worry about it. You're just feeling what is. So really take heart, because if you can feel during these times, you're on track.
Thank you, Eric. Final word.
Yeah, well, once again, I want to just echo Robert as I kind of did before. But the main thing going on for me and all of this astrology is this last touch of Saturn in Pisces for the next few months. And I would say, from my pulse on the collective and my window into experience is that there really is a pervasive sense of disillusionment out there. Is this really what we thought it would be at this time? People are feeling ripped off. This is not what I thought 2025 would be like. What happened? And there is this jadedness that I think is extremely pervasive out there that, I don't want to get into political things, but that certainly is part of it in the U.S. Is this really the best and brightest? Are we really paving the way for this age of Aquarius with a lot of talent and a lot of wisdom and foresight about evolution around our collective progress? It doesn't appear that way for many of us. So my encouragement is to withhold judgment. Hold on. This is part of the process. This is the growing pains. This is the necessary exposure of the things that need to be addressed so we can then gradually over decades build from this seed moment that I believe we're in and what all this astrology. So, I like the phrase I've heard, you can't microwave transformation. You can't just put it in the microwave and put 2 minutes and we're all going to be in the new age or the new world or whatever the heck we want to call it. It's much more gradual than that. So have the long view, trust life, and be with this poignant letting go. Be with this poignant disillusionment. Be with this jadedness, because there's a gift in it which could motivate us to do our part. And that is my prayer.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, Ray, last words.
It's about learning to believe in yourself, because perhaps sociologically, even religiously, everything we have believed in is looking at us and saying we don't matter. So the only response to that is you have to matter to yourself. You have to develop a faith in yourself, transform all of your energies to self-development, and things will be possible for you to evolve and survive past this, because that's our job. Get the message, pass it on.
Thank you all. It's a wrap.
Metamedia presents New Horizons, conscious conversations for inner exploration and awakening.
I'd like to thank the panelists, Cayelin, Robert, Eric, and Ray for sharing your astrological insights into the equinox, and to you for taking the time to join us. Blessings to all.
And blessings.